Welcome back, everybody. Well, that's not a very good start, is it? Let's do some drawing. Today I just wanted to do some sketches and sort of different versions of Aella, because I just can't figure out which one I like more. So this is sort of the traditional one where she always wears this wrap, and there's a big part of the story around about not seeing what's really in the world. It's a weird one, but thematically it's because the world is just of the waste. It's so terrifying that it would make you go mad. And this is why the Compass Mentis score is so important in the game. So that the more Compass Mentis you have, the sort of more resilience you have to the world itself. And yeah, it's just another stat really that sort of affects how you do when you're, in the wastes away from the half ship. When you're close to the half ship, it sort of has a frostpunk feel, with not so much the heat, but just being near home. It's a matter of safety, and it makes you feel less scared of the world, sort of thing. And Aella is no different, and she always has these wraps, and I haven't quite decided yet if all characters have like the ability to swap out the carapaces, and that's the weird bone-like masks that a lot of the drawings have. So yeah, I don't know. It's difficult to balance a game like that because everyone acts so differently. And in fact, I've actually the last week or so, I've actually gone back over a lot of the stuff I originally said and did, and wondered if it would be an easier system to work with if everyone had access to the same very large talent tree, and then you still have your character's specific mini game and starting attributes. So I guess there's a sense that you could make any character a damage dealer, any character, I suppose even a healer or a tank, depending on the sort of abilities you go for and the large ability tree. But keeping each character's, special little dice game. So Aella's is controlling the Druid's legacy, and we'll go into that today actually, because I did hint about the fact that Aella is not a goodie, and I don't think you really play with the goodies in the game, but more about that later. Yeah, so I just wanted to do a few little variations of sort of her hair, it's almost like a crown, I guess, in a weird sense that Aella is somewhat royalty in this game. It's a strange system, but the lore so far within it is that there was many druids once in this world, and they were seen as healers and saviors, and what happens when a druid died, they would go into the ground, and this legacy, this large series of roots and life force that lived underground would assimilate. Is that the right word? Assimilate? It sounds funny. Assimilate the dying druid, and they would become a part of it. And each druid that died, the druid's legacy would become more and more powerful. But because there was just this one large mass of, the ancestors of the druid, they were sort of shared out this power, this ability. So, like, oh, you know what? What's that film? Oh no, there can only be one. Oh no, what is it? You know what I'm talking about, right? Highlander. You know what? It kind of has a sort of a Highlander feel. So, each time one died, this life force was spread about, and they're more and more powerful. And there was a Jet Li film that had sort of the same. I think it was called The One. I think it was just that. So yeah, the more druids that passed on into like the ethereal, which is sort of connected to the wastes in this world, the more powerful they get. And Aella knew about this, she figured it out. And being the villain that she is, she hunted the last remaining druids. So we actually drew sort of somewhat druids a few weeks ago. And I think they're not so much druids as those that want ill harm of Aella for the terrible things that she did to achieve this power. And they sort of followed the law of what the original druids were, and that was sort of helping others and you know, what's the word I'm thinking about? I guess balance, you know, in the world and the life force and all that. And yeah, she's very naughty, but very cool. Yeah, so this one I've sort of done like almost like a crown. It's all like decay and roots and stuff, but actually sort of taken her over more so than this version, which is kind of like a more feral, kind of feels more like a Herloff character, the barbarian one. And this one feels more royal, you know, it's sort of crown and more lesser trophies than this one, but you know, so it's quite a. I think it's all about movement for me. Like even if the image doesn't really make sense, as long as sort of the details are there and they have, you know, this really nice sense of balance and well, really, just so they look cool, then I'm all for it. I just remembered what the question was the other day. Fantastic. Someone asked me, how do I go about sort of keeping track of the details of the drawings? And that's a great question because I don't really know. I mean, sometimes I leave spaces, and like as I go along, I just leave little spaces everywhere. So if I think as I'm going along, if I can go, actually that needs a little bit more there. I just sort of like fill in the gaps, and it seems a weird way to go about it, but it's more of a sort of a think on my feet sort of thing, and you know, it just makes it more fun to draw really than anything. So yeah, that's kind of my answer. Even though it's a kind of a rubbish answer and it doesn't really give a lot, but I suppose in terms of details, I'm always looking for something that adds to the character and also has the negative space. So the hair, I think, is somewhere you can just have fun with and just create as much as you like, where the negative space, the skin, you know, other than jawbone and sort of like an anime outline of everything, you know, it's got that balance. And I guess that's how I do my details. I have chaos at one bit and then less chaos another. Does that make sense? In my head, that almost makes sense. So yeah, I hope that answers the question, but if it hasn't, really let me know, and I'll have another think about that. But again, thank you so much for, you know, the questions. They make these videos much easier rather than me just rambling on about cups of tea. Which, by the way, if you haven't got your cup of tea, you know, stick that pause button on and go grab yourself one. A few bickies. That's what weekends are all about. Biggies and cups of tea. And this version was one where Aella doesn't have the, you know, the wraps covering her eyes, and she's more, I think she's more of this rot, this fungi than the other ones, and so it has that sort of Last of Us feel, you know. Yeah, I think that's kind of cool. But I imagine these protrusions from my head, sort of a mix of decay, mold, bone, shell. Yeah, very kind of creepy. And I just thought this one I'd try more of a, you know, like almost greasy head, shorter as well, and then the large plait at the back. And again, this is purely aesthetics. It's just plats I find are just really fun to draw, and you can kind of make them messy, and it doesn't make them worse, you know. I mean, not that messy. I wasn't paying attention. I kind of just drawing shapes at one point. You know what? Because we got little gaps. I put little. It kind of almost looks like a little spine, which is creepy, and kind of fits with the character as well. So yeah, she's not a goodie, which I like that. And it's not so much you're playing with the heroes, you're playing with, I mean, they have somewhat of a good quest, you know, the gathering of the souls lost in the wastes. But until we go more into why and what's the purpose of it, and the purpose of the hardship, actually we'll just leave it there. Yeah. So yeah, a little bit of negative space. I quite like this one because you can see her nose, but I think this, I'm not sure which one's my favourite. If you got a favourite, let me know. We'll do this one as number 3, number 2, and number 1. Yeah, I'll just draw a few more little details on the end of her plat, because it looks fun. Do some little hairs like sticking out. Cool. Do some hairs here as well, maybe some little fungi. Cool. So I was talking about the Druid's crown and the Druid's legacy, and let me just move this. Excuse me. I've got the hiccups. 2 seconds. Let me have a little sip of my tea. Much better. So I've drawn a little mini. Oh, and I've smudged all of it. Fantastic. Good job, man. So here's a little mini version of Aella, just for demonstration purposes. So here's a little hair, little face. I've done a very basic little garb for her today instead of her slightly more complex one. Complex one. Little bag, and yeah, and at the bottom of her garb. And then, as we talked before in the past, her garb almost turns into somewhat of a tail, and it feels like it, in my head, it's almost autonomous. Autonomous. Am I saying that right? Doesn't feel like I am. Anyway, so this tail sort of has roots coming out of it, and it doesn't offer any damage or attacks or anything like that. But it's just sort of not just hers alive, but everything on her is, if that makes sense. And then we're going to draw a little bit of the ground, do a little broken up, so we can add things later on if we want to. We don't need it perfect. We can have it interacting a little bit with the tail dress thing. We'll put some little mushrooms on there too, even though it's probably too small to see in her little spores. Cool. So basically her whole mini game is she's healer, sort of a controller sort of character, but also with the idea of changing how the ability tree works and how everyone has access to things. We'll just keep it to her special ability, which is she'll have like a passive, so she still have that uniqueness, and her mini game is foraging for these materials to use the abilities of the Druid's legacy. And I've said before in the past, she's like a mage, but I didn't want to give too much, but I felt today, why not? So the Druid's legacy is basically an accumulation of hundreds, if not more, of these Druids that have passed on, and they've become this huge, hulking, sentient life form, but it's still attached to whatever Druid's left. So, even though Aella is not a goodie, she has full control of well, not full control, but I think it's a sense of, she's bound to it, and the Druid's legacy is also bound to her. But with that, I think there's a sense that they know that she's not good. She's not upholding her end of the bargain. So yeah, I always thought it was kind of cool to have, sort of an evil druid, because they always come across so, pure and all that malarkey. So yeah, it's almost like it's got arms and limbs and roots that pull itself through the earth, and with the abilities that she uses, it's sort of sending off the limbs of the druid's legacy to complete her tasks and attack her foes. So yeah, a lot of it will be sort of blight involved. So we talked about blight before in this game, and it lowers the excuse me, it lowers the ability for enemies to heal. So even though she doesn't do a lot of damage, I mean, unless you armed her with some really good weaponry and upgraded her attacks and stuff like that, but as a whole, she's quite a weak damaging character. She's definitely not a DPS. But if oh, I lost my train of thought. Oh, that was going well as well, wasn't it? Oh, dear me. Where was I going? Sorry, I got completely enraptured with the doodling. So yeah, she's not a DPS, but she could be Blight. Yeah, Blight. So Blight's fantastically effective because even though you're not doing damage to the enemy, it's a constant. I mean, it will it will cost ingredients that she forages in the world itself. But oh no, I've done it again. Oh, I'm so sorry. Shambles, absolute shambles. But the blight actually negates the enemy to get back any health. Well, not back any health, but a fair portion. So it's that constant passive, denying the enemy time to heal. And a lot of the enemies do have healing actions, and they'll come in usually hordes. It won't just be a one-off enemy. Even the nightmares, well, we'll go back into another time, but they can have others that join them, even though they're sort of a boss character. Yeah, so it just stops the healer being as effective on the enemy's team. Yeah, I mean, it can even be used with your allies, and there's certain statuses that could be something like each turn you heal naturally, or when you heal naturally, you'll get damage of some sort of poison or an effect, or gain madness that will make you cause you to want to attack your allies. So with this, Aella could actually put Blight on you to shut that down, so you don't get that negative status effect. Does that make sense? But yeah, stuff like that. I think it's kind of cool. So yeah, that's enough about the Druid's Legacy. We'll just do a little Druid's Legacy. Hope that's big enough to see. I'm nearly in the site, yeah. There's Aella. There's the Druid's Legacy. Now, we've talked a tiny bit about this, I think. So the Druid's Crown, when you're in the world, or especially when you're in a fight, you might naturally not have any ingredients to use. And Aella has a strange passive where if she doesn't have ingredients, she can use her own breath, her stamina per turn, her actions, as it were. But also the other way around. So if you don't have any breath, you can use your ingredients to power your stamina. So it's quite a cool trade-off, but whatever you're trading for will be a lesser amount than what you have, because I think there's a sense of balance in the game. But when you don't have anything to forage, Aella can really become quite unstuck quite quickly. So the idea of it is that if you have breath, but you always have breath each turn unless, a negative effect is lower, and it will or you're exhausted. There's lots there to it, but the idea is if you don't have any ingredients, you can basically ask the druid and summon a druid's crown, which is where you will be able to forage. There's also other abilities with the druid's crown, such as you'll be able to hide in it, so you'll be able to make it monstrous. That's easier. And you'll be able to use it as camouflage, and you'll be able to actually stealth and, almost like an octopus, because it's the natural environment Ayla's really good at. So even though she's a bit of a naughty, she still has a lot of connections to the natural world. Yeah. And that's kind of a little bit more. I just wanted to share a little bit more about the character and a little bit of her lore, because I think she's kind of one of my favorites, but don't tell the others. But yeah, so whenever she's moving around, she's got this creature under the ground, only a couple of feet, that follows her. And I think that's really cool. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed this one, and I'll see you next time. All the best. Bye.